Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this roundtable webinar hosted by Salsify and Start With Data. We're well into 2023. Digital commerce is more important than ever in retail and distribution, and customers are demanding an ever-increasing breadth of product information to support their B2C and B2B purchasing journeys. And to meet these greater data demands, we believe retailers and distributors must work better with their suppliers in a frictionless and collaborative manner, both in terms of processes and also the technologies they use to exchange product data. And building on this, Start With Data and Salsify have joined forces in the market to help suppliers, retailers and distributors break down silos to build better product experiences for their customers together. So what's on the agenda for the next 30 to 40 minutes? Well, in the first section of this webinar, we will talk about why data collaboration is the foundation for building great product experiences for your customers, and then how we can enable this frictionless data collaboration with modern technology and efficient processes. And then at the end, during our Q&A discussion, we're going to hear some learnings from Start With Data and Salsify based on our experience with retailers and distributors we're actively tackling this problem with. So just a quick note, during this webinar, please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them at the last section of the webinar. So who do we have on our panel joining me today? Well, I'm Ben Adams and I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Start With Data. Start With Data have joined forces with Salsify to offer the market a unique combination of PIM expertise and services coupled with a leading technology solution. And we think Salsify are uniquely positioned as a technology provider in the product experience and supply collaboration space. And with their leading PXM technology combined with a one-of-a-kind supplier experience management offering, they're helping retailers and distributors with the support of partners like Start With Data to break down silos, enabling fast and efficient product data onboarding and exchange. And I'm really happy to say I'm joined today by two awesome product leaders from the Salsify team. I'd like to welcome Jim and Maurizio to the webinar. Over to you guys to introduce yourselves.
Thank you very much, Ben, and hello, everybody. So I'm Jim Sullivan, and I work for Salsify in the pre-sales organization.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mauricio Garcia. I'm a product marketing lead at Salsify, specifically for the Supply XM product line.
Thanks, Mauricio. And so just to give you a little bit of an update on Salsify. So we're a software vendor, and we have solutions to help both suppliers and retailers get the most from their product data. So one of the things that we do is we work very closely with partners. I'm very pleased to be on the call today with Start With Data. So one of the things that you'll hear on the call today is that Start With Data has a lot of industry and customer expertise, and joining up with them and working together really helps us ensure that we can provide the best solution for customers. And that's both from a product perspective and also from a consultancy perspective.
Thanks, Jim and Maurizio. So really great to be with you here today. So without further ado, let's move on to the first section of this webinar. So in this first section, I'm going to invite Maurizio to discuss with me why data collaboration is the foundation of building great product experiences for your customers, and what are the market challenges that are driving a need for better data collaboration. So first off, Maurizio, for our listeners, what is data collaboration?
Okay, thanks for the intro, Ben. So we're going to see it in more detail throughout the webinar, but to put in a very simple way, it is the processes, tools, and activities that enable the onboarding and maintenance of product data from suppliers for retailers and distributors.
And why is it so important for building a great product experience?
I think it has a lot to do with the challenges we're going to cover later on, but the very dynamic retail environment with constantly evolving consumer demands, market regulations, and increasing competitive pressures forces retailers to adapt quickly, and this has also direct impact on the product data they request from their suppliers. So also there are many risks associated with publishing wrong product information. So from operational to regulatory. So in the end, without a very good collaboration between suppliers and retailers, it's very difficult to quickly onboard new data, to guarantee it's of high quality, and also to make corrections when needed. So it has a lot to do with the context we're living in. That puts a lot of pressure on both suppliers and retailers and increases this need for collaboration.
Thanks, Maurizio. So, when we work with large retailers and distributors across Europe, it's given us a unique insight, both Start With Data and Salsify, into the market trends that are driving the need for this frictionless data collaboration, as Maurizio just described. So I'm going to talk through some of those key trends now, and Maurizio is going to share some really interesting insight into that. So the first trend we're seeing in the market is that retailers and distributors are needing to acquire and manage an ever increasing volume of data from their suppliers to support the build out of these product experiences. And a product experience refers to any touch point across a B2C or a B2B buying journey. So that could be like research, discovery, purchase, or after sales. And all of these parts of the buying journey require product data to make them successful. So product experience touches every aspect of a retail distributor operation to allow them to enable a truly omni-channel service to their customers. And this demand for greater breadth and length of product data is coming from a variety of different use cases. So just some examples. E-commerce platforms and experiences are requiring a lot more than just basic product information now. So things like composition, allergy, nutritional material, provenance and information, not to mention engaging content like tutorials, specification sheets, images, and rich media. There's also a great demand from logistics-based use cases, particularly those around weights and dimensions or parcel integrity specifications to help with robotic warehouse handling. And finally, a real hot topic at the moment is quality and CSR. It's become a real strategic focus for retailers and distributors in the last couple of years. And standards are getting more and more stringent to hold the right data across all verticals, things like compliance information, product charters, data on materials, packaging, recyclability, or regulatory information, as we see in Europe. So we've got an ever expanding volume of product information that needs to be acquired from suppliers. So Salsify, I've seen some really interesting statistics on this growth of information demand. Maurizio, what have you found in your recent reports?
Yes, so this is from our annual consumer research, and it shows the growing importance of product information for consumers. So here in the first stat, it shows that shoppers are just as likely to buy in stores as on the retail side. 68% of them buy on both. So this means that you need to offer engaging product experience on both digital and physical channels, which is what we see also in the second stat here. 39% of consumers, they looked at a product online while buying in the store. And also consumers are very research driven. 58% of them say they research product quality before they buy something from a company. And also 58% of them say not having enough product information is a likely reason for not buying a product online. So as you can see, consumers are buying in more channels and looking for more information across these channels. And this can have a huge impact on the amount of data suppliers and retailers have to provide.
Thanks, Maurizio. So as Maurizio said, consumers on B2C, customers on B2B, they're buying in more channels, they're looking for more information. And this is all driving a huge impact on the demand for the volume of product data acquired from suppliers. So let's talk about the second trend we're seeing that's driving a need for better data collaboration. Well, we're in an ever-evolving market landscape at the moment, and this is driven by retailers and distributor demands. And suppliers have to adapt to this. So retailers and distributors are always changing their requirements in the race to improve the mix of their product offerings and also the expansion of product categories or even services. And this continuous change is driving a constant upstream pressure on suppliers needing to provide product data in different formats and at different stages of the listing process. And we think this evolving landscape will never end. So Maurizio, what sort of insight can you give us into this changing landscape from some of your customers?
Yeah, so this is a stat we collected from the Salsify platform that shows the impact of the increasing demand for product information you just mentioned, Ben. What we see here is that the increasing number of suppliers, attributes, and products results in a 56% early increase in product data volume. It means that every 2 years, the volume of data your teams have to manage doubles, and that's huge. It also has an impact on suppliers, as we're going to see on the next slide. So here, what you see in January, it's extremely difficult to keep up with different data requirements from many retailers. So imagine if these requirements are changing constantly, because each retailer is competing for consumers against other similar channels. They are constantly optimizing their websites to show new or different types of content than their competitors. And what we can see here is that retailers end up changing their requirements many times a year. And this can go up to more than 330 times a year, as you can see the stat here for Leclerc in France.
Wow. So, trend to an ever-evolving market landscape that creates a constantly changing demand on suppliers, as you can see, as Maurizio showed there from some existing customers. So what's the third trend that is happening right now? Well, everybody understands that there's a weak economic outlook currently. And what this is meaning is there's a much greater focus on operational efficiencies required by retailers and distributors to counterbalance some of the margin pressures that are being created in the economy right now. And when we work with retailer and distribution clients, we find that there's a few things driving this inefficiency. So there's a lot of legacy of archaic tooling that drives high cost to introduce or maintain products. And what we find is that a lot of the processes involved in managing things like product introduction or maintenance, they're very high touch, they're very sequential activities, and they involve quite siloed teams, both the relationship between the supplier and the retailer distributor, and actually within the retailer distributor themselves. And all of these inefficiencies have a great time and cost impact. And that's the opposite to the operational efficiency that a lot of our customers are looking for, given their economic outlook. So Maurizio, what have you guys found with your customers in terms of this trend?
Yeah, I think this illustrates pretty well what you just mentioned. What we see here is that to launch a single SKU, retailers can have up to 15 interactions with a supplier and more than 5 teams involved. So multiply this by thousands of products, and then can quickly see the operation and financial impact this inefficient data collection process can have.
Really interesting. So, I mean, what a great slide to use for a business case to improve the efficiency of product introduction within your organization. So 3 challenging market trends that we're seeing that all really point to the need for better processes and tools to drive collaboration and efficiency between retailers and distributors and their suppliers. Well, the good news is that businesses can adapt to these challenges by investing in 3 key areas. And now I'd like to hand over to Jim, who's going to talk about these 3 capabilities we believe retailers and distributors should be investing in. So over to you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So what I'd like to really cover are some of the challenges that retailers and suppliers can see. And if You can just go to the next slide, Ben. So there are three challenges that I'd like to touch on. And the first one is the need to centralize and standardize the data management and collection process. So this is both between suppliers and retailers, but also internally. And this helps them address that first trend, which was the increasing data volume. The second challenge we're going to look at is around the need to get value from the data, to be able to use it quickly, and to be able to address that trend of different ways of purchasing by consumers today. And the third challenge we'll have a look at is for the frictionless collaboration between suppliers and retailers. And this is really to improve the operational efficiency and help address the trend of the weak market economy. So let's have a look at those one by one. And the first one I wanted to touch on was the first challenge around having a centralized solution, really having the right tools to work with. And one of the things that we see for both the suppliers and the retailers is that there are many teams working with product data, and those different teams have different needs for the data. They're often using different solutions. And all of these organizations have the need to have a unified platform. And this has really helped them increase the sort of efficiency and productivity of the team by having a single application which will hold not just the product data, but everything around the product data. So the notifications, the workflows, the reporting, and this will help organizations meet their auditing and reporting needs. Now, the other thing that we see with this is that we're not just talking about the B2C data. This is not just the data that goes on the website, but all of these organizations have a need to manage different types of data. There's logistical data, there's regulatory data, there's contractual data. And what we see quite often with organizations today is that they have different tools to manage these different types of data. So having a centralized platform will help them have a unique place to manage all of this information. And there are really two needs here. There's an internal need, so both from the supplier and retailer perspective, to be able to manage their content internally, make sure that they have the best content that they can have. But the other need is really around allowing these retailers and suppliers to work together and share information. And what we see when we go and speak to a lot of these organizations is they're still often using old ways of exchanging data. They're using email, they're using phone, some are even using fax to be able to share information. And finally, the other thing which is important around this is that when we talk about these organizations, we're talking about retailers and brands. These are very different sizes, organizations. They can be very different sizes. So if you think of a retailer, they could be working with a supplier that is a multi-billion organization that has a lot of processes in place, or it could be a very small supplier that just sells one or two products. And it doesn't matter how big that product is or how big that organization is, that need to acquire information and have it in a specific format is going to be key across all of those suppliers. So what's really key is having these solutions in place, having a centralized platform in place, and being able to onboard the suppliers, get everybody using the platform very, very quickly. The second challenge I wanted to touch on was around the data quality, and really being able to get value from that data. And one of the things for all organizations is that the quality of the data is absolutely key. What it will help organizations do is it will help them ensure that they can meet the business needs they want. It will help them reduce the number of returns, and it will help them expand in offer new offerings to their customers. Now, when we talk about data quality, we're talking about several things. One, we're talking about getting the data that you need. So you need to be able to define what data you need to meet your business needs. And then the other thing which is key is being able to ensure that data is valid. So you need to have certain validation rules in place. And what you also need to be able to do is adapt to new needs by quickly deploying changes to those data model requirements. Mauricio touched on this when we talked about the trends. He talked about the different organizations changing their needs very frequently. So it's key that retailers and suppliers can meet this change. And just to give you an example, we had one of our customers recently. It was actually a DIY customer. But what they had, it was a retailer, they had 190,000 products, and they realized they needed to get a new attribute from their suppliers. They needed to get the repairability index from their suppliers. And so what they did is they used our solution to be able to reach out to all of their suppliers, several thousand suppliers, and get that repairability index. But what they could also do was track how quickly they're getting that data, track the accuracy, see which suppliers hadn't provided the data, and they ended up managing to get all of that data within 6 weeks. And what is also key is to ensure that that data is valid. And when we talk about the multiple exchanges between different teams at retailers and suppliers, one of the things that we see is that you often have multiple teams at the retailer validating the same data. And so with a centralized platform, it becomes a lot more simple to determine who should be validating what. And you can also determine what you want to validate. Maybe some of the data is not so key. You say, well, I don't need to validate this. Other attributes may be absolutely key, and you want to make sure that that gets validated. Maybe also the retailer would like to use this platform to provide feedback to the suppliers. So you can imagine if you're working with a small supplier, if you're a large retailer working with a small supplier, you'd like to be able to provide input and feedback on the data that's being provided. And then the other thing, when we talk about a platform to meet the needs of all of the teams, those needs are very different from team to team. And so different teams will need to be able to enable or disable different validation rules to meet specific requirements. So when we talked about the first challenge, we talked about a centralized solution to manage all of the data, but that centralized solution will also allow these organizations to manage how that data is actually stored and worked with and validated to ensure that the retailers have the data that they actually need. And then if we look at our third key challenge, which is really around reducing the friction between suppliers and retailers. And I think one thing which is very interesting from this when we go and talk to customers is the different messages we get from both. And we had a very interesting discussion with a retailer quite recently about their process for getting data from the suppliers. And they were telling us what a great system they had. But we later on spoke to some of those suppliers, and they said what a difficult system it was to work with. So I think it really illustrates that the view of that difficulty of getting data is very different depending on which side you're on. So one of the things that we're not going to do is change the way that relationship is managed between the suppliers and retailers, because those relationships have been in place for a long time. And they probably have a good relationship or a bad relationship. But the problem is there's this increase in the number of channels, the increase in the amount of data, the attributes, and the validation. And so those exchanges, those interactions between the suppliers and the retailers have got a lot more complex. And so by providing these tools, it makes it easier for both teams. It makes it easier for teams at the supplier and at the retailers. You can have workflows to help ensure that the data is filled out correctly. You can assign tasks. You can do real-time quality monitoring. You can do reporting. We can even do AI suggestions for the content. So it really makes it easier for both of those teams to work together. And this really brings benefits for both the retailers and the suppliers. So for the suppliers, there's sort of, you could call it an intangible benefit. It makes it a lot easier to use solutions. It makes it easier also for retailers to ensure they meet regulatory compliance requirements. We have a lot of retailers working with our solution, specifically around regulatory requirements. So it could be ensuring they have the necessary HFSS data if it's a food retailer, the necessary safety sheets if it's if they're selling technical equipment, the necessary installation instructions if they're selling furniture, for example. So all of these regulatory needs can be met using the solution. And then there are also some tangible benefits, accelerated time to market, being able to get the data quickly, being able to reduce the cost of data acquisition, and being able to reduce the time of acquiring that data. And here again, we work with some very large retailers. One of them got our solution specifically to meet two specific requirements. One of them was around the time to shelf, and they reduced that from a matter of weeks to days. And then the other one was specifically around the data quality. So ensuring that they had the necessary data quality to feed their website and to reduce the number of returns of products that didn't meet the descriptions. So really three challenges for the retailers, all really related to the quality of the data and the ease with which that data can be managed, both from a supplier perspective, a retailer perspective, and from those retailers and suppliers being able to work together.
Awesome, Jim. So some really fascinating and highly valuable guidance there on the capabilities your businesses should be investing in to drive collaboration and efficiency. So thanks so much, Jim, for the insight. So look, we're nearing the end of this section of the webinar. So before we move on to some Q&A, I'd just like to do a quick recap on the discussions and topics we've covered today. So at the beginning, we heard how data collaboration is necessary for retailers and distributors to create compelling customer experiences by working with their suppliers. And by data collaboration, we mean the processes, the tools, and the activities that enable the onboarding and maintenance of product data from suppliers for retailers and distributors. And there's three key market trends here driving the need to invest in these capabilities, as I discussed with Mauricio. So the first one was that there's a necessity to acquire and manage an ever-growing volume and breadth of product data by retailers and distributors from their suppliers. The second trend we've seen is that the channel landscape is continuously evolving, and it requires more attributes which suppliers need to adapt to. And then the third market trend we see is that there's an ongoing weak economic outlook, and this is really driving a need for efficiencies for retailers and distributors and how they collaborate and work with their suppliers. Well, as a retail distributor, how do you face into these trends? Well, we heard from Jim that you should focus on solving three key challenges. The first challenge being start to centralize your data collection processes through running parallel processes and create this concept of a central hub for onboarding and managing the data in your organization. And then secondly, use a tool like Salsify that lets you keep up with the challenge of this constantly changing attribute channel requirements. And then finally, you can look to reduce operational friction between you and your suppliers by enhancing the ongoing operation through automated tooling and processes. So if you'd like to discuss any aspect of solving these challenges with Start With Data or with Salsify, myself, Jim and Mauricio would love to hear from you. We're very passionate about this topic, three of us. So just feel free to reach out to us anytime. Our emails are on this slide. Just to let our listeners know, before we move on to some Q&A now, the webinar has been recorded and will be shared with all registered attendees, and it will also be available through the Start With Data and Salsify websites from tomorrow. So thanks for listening so far, and we hope you found all of the discussion really informative. We're now going to move on to a few questions. Feel free to pop them in the Q&A box we've already got a few questions, so I'm gonna pick a few and divvy them out. So let's pick the first question. So we've got a question here from a supplier. So we already send product data to dozens of retailers around Europe. Admittedly, it's through Excel and it's quite manual, something we hear very often. So how would Salsify supplier onboarding platform make this process easier? Maurizio, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a lot related to what Jim just mentioned. So for the first thing, we have a centralized platform to send data to all your retailers, no matter the data format or type of data they're requesting. And the second one, on the platform, we have collaboration tools and automated tools such as chat, data quality reporting that help your teams work faster and also meet retailer requirements. And finally, we combine this platform with services. So we have assisted onboarding services that help suppliers of any size get onboarded and send data to retailers without friction.
Thanks, Maurizio. So I've got another question here. What other services are required around the Salsify platform to ensure it's successful? Jim, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, happy to take that one. So that's a great question. Now, when we deploy the platform for a retailer, for example, that's going to take a certain amount of time because we need to have a look at their data model. We need to have a look at the validation rules. So we're talking, maybe from weeks to months to do that deployment, get the retailer teams onboarded and up and running. Now, the other thing which is important is that the success of a platform like this really depends on the uptake by the suppliers. And so what we need to do is we need to ensure that the suppliers get onboarded onto the platform. And we work very closely with partners like Start With Data. We work very closely with we have an onboarding team within our organization. And so what we can do is we can reach out to all of these suppliers and get them onto the platform very, very quickly. And just to give you an idea, we did a deployment for a very large, it was actually a food retailer with 4,000 suppliers, and we got all of those 4,000 suppliers onto the platform in a matter of about 4 months. Now, that goes from everything from the very large suppliers down to those very small suppliers. So it's a pretty big task, but it's one of the things that is key. And so partners like Start With Data can really help organizations, because when we talk about deploying, it's not just installing software and configuring software. There is a change management aspect to this. And this is one of the things that we see with a lot of retailers is they'd like to modernize their infrastructure. They'd like to improve their way of working. And so the solution itself is just one part of that. And that's really why we work with Start With Data, to be able to offer that full breadth of services to meet those needs.
Thanks, Jim. Got another question here. So are the market trends that were presented more or less relevant for the B2B market and businesses? Maybe we can both have a stab at answering that one. So from Start With Data's perspective, the short answer is yes. If you look at the three trends, we covered the greater volume of data, the economic outlook one, and with the efficiency view. They are very relevant to B2B distributors, distribution businesses in all kind of industry verticals and product types. And actually what we find with like some of our distribution customers, particularly like industrial distribution businesses, is the products are extremely complicated. So if not, they're like more complicated than a lot of like the B2C retail offered products. So all that does is just amplify the problem even more. So they're definitely true for both B2C and the B2B market. Does Salsify have a view on this one as well at all? Do you want to give some insight, Maurizio, Jim?
So I mean, I think at least the challenges are the same across the two, because if you think about the relationship between the suppliers and the retailers, the retailer will want to feed a lot of different back-end systems. So for B2C, it quite often is going to be that e-commerce information that wants to go to the website. But there is a lot of other information. When we talk about the logistical information, regulatory information, contractual information. And so that type of information is very relevant to the B2B market as well. So yes, we see across the board that same need to be able to manage content, both on the supplier side, the retailer side, and be able to exchange the data between the two.
Yeah. Definitely agree. I think the other things, well, we're seeing like a very strong trend of digitization within the B2B sector that we would argue it's in its relative infancy, but that will accelerate over the next few years. So this whole notion of like data exchange and collaboration and the kind of digitization of those processes is going to become more and more important as well for B2B businesses as well. Great. All right, let's take one more question. So buying for a business case for investment into these capabilities, how does that generally happen? So I can take that one. So what we usually find with any product data centric initiative is that there's usually two aspects to focus on, right? One is the data quality aspect. So that's the impact of poor product data quality is that it's having on your customer experience today, right? So we all know that product discovery, the research journey, the purchasing journey, it's all affected by poor levels of completeness of product data. And if that data isn't making it to your customers in the right length and breadth and formats to help your product experience, we would argue the root cause may be on the supplier side of your organization if you're a retailer or distributor, because you just may not be acquiring that data at all, right? And so to create a business case, you need to connect those two things together. You need to look at the data quality impact, and then you need to trace that backwards to the supplier side of your organization. So that's one aspect to look at. And then the other aspect, which we talked loads about on today, is actually the process aspect, right? So this relates to like the time and cost associated with processes like new product introduction or product maintenance with your suppliers. So you can look at your existing onboarding processes. You could look at like the time and cost impacts of all those manual things like Jim was describing and Maurizio touched on in the stats earlier. And if you really adopt kind of automation and you adopt this central hub model, you can make massive savings, in time and cost efficiencies. So I think with all that, there's a huge business case here. Just kind of got to go and look for it really, and some of that research that Mauricio showed earlier is really, really valuable. So I think on that note, I think we're just about out of time, but I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks to all the listeners who joined and the people that registered for the webinar. Thanks from me. Really enjoyed talking to you guys. Jim and Mauricio, thanks so much for joining too.
Yeah, thanks to you for Ben.
Thanks everyone. Yeah.
And thanks everybody for being on the call today.
The webinar will be available, and we're really looking forward to continued discussions with anyone that joins. So with that, we'll end the webinar now and have a great rest of your Thursday. Thank you.